Welcome to the Manifestation and Money Podcast, Cody.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. So, can you share a bit about who you are and what your story is?
Yeah, I'm a personal financial coach and I help people with like a lot of what you would probably guess, which is like helping people get out of debt, build up their savings, get starting into investing, all that good, normal kind of stuff. But I think that what makes me a little bit more unique is that I take a very heavy emphasis on the money psychology side of things. So, how things affect us with our mental health or our emotional health, or for those people who are married, or even like our relational health. And just like our overall relationship with money, I found that that's where the success really lies, or, the people's potential really lies. So I put a heavy emphasis on that. But that's pretty much what I do and who I am.
That's fascinating. So, like lots of our listeners are in the FIRE movement or trying to achieve that
hmm
idea of financial independence and retiring early. So, what are some key pieces you think for people to get on the path to financial freedom?
Yeah. So I will also say that I'm also on that train as well. I have a 5-year plan and I have a 10-year plan. And I'm 30. So my goal is to retire before I'm 40 or sooner. There's several different things that you would need to do in order to have that be a possibility. I mean, obviously you'd want to lower your liabilities and build up your assets, right? And that's like one kind of thing. But a huge, it's one thing to just say that, but it's another thing to actually accomplish it. And I think that a big part of that has to do with understanding like why you want to retire early in the first place. And like what you're actually going to do with all that time. Are you going to sit on the beach, or are you going to give back to the community? What's the big why? Like what's the big purpose of that? And really finding that out to make it be something that's like very important to you and something that's really worth fighting for, so that when those roadblocks or speed bumps do come up, that you're going to keep going. You're not going to get discouraged. You're not going to run out of gas or anything like that, but you're going to have that tool in your back pocket to keep going. And then even just understanding like why you might be spending money a certain way, or why you might be investing your money a certain way, what your beliefs around money are. Like all those different types of things I think are really important for us to understand, that are going to actually pour gas on the fire, pun intended, gas on the fire, right?
Love it.
To speed up that process, one, but then also two, I think just having it be an overall higher quality of journey to get to that early retirement. I think that's really important too. Like we can retire early, but if the road to get there is just super not fun, it's not going to be a fun retirement either, because your brain's going to be conditioned to go through that suck, that once you get to that promised land of retirement, it's going to be a hard thing to break that kind of scarcity mindset that you might have been fostering in order to get there.
Yeah, you make a very good point there because I see people in FIRE movement groups that have achieved financial independence and retire early. So they're younger, they're in their, say, 40s or even early 50s. And they're
hmm
like, now what? They didn't see the big picture. They've just
Right.
grinded it out. They don't have any hobbies. They don't have like
hmm
any sense of community because they have just been working so hard to get to this goal of early retirement that, like you said, they don't know how to relax and enjoy retirement when they get there, and they don't have a big picture of what they want to do. So, sure, you can say, oh, yeah, I'm going to travel and have a 2-week trip planned out. But then
hmm
what, right? Like retirement
Right.
is a lifestyle. So, you should, along this journey, I think, be preparing for the lifestyle that you're wanting to have in retirement as you're on that path to early retirement.
Exactly. Yeah, it's one of those things where if you can think about that ideal lifestyle that you want in retirement, and then basically take that lifestyle, but just shrink it by like a percentage kind of thing. Like let's say that retirement's like 100%, like that's the 100% ideal lifestyle, right? Maybe we shrink it for the journey to 50% or 30% or 60% of that lifestyle. That way you're able to once you get to the finish line, it's not like a drastic change to where you're like so confused about like what you're going to be able to do, how you're going to be able to do it, what's going to bring you purpose and fulfillment, all the different types of things. You can just amplify it once you cross that finish line, rather than trying to figure out something new. That's something I think is really, really important because so even with like what I do, I help a lot of people, like I mentioned, like get out of debt, build up their savings, all that kind of stuff, right? And one thing that I see people wanting to do, and I've even seen people in the financial world tell people to do this, is that they say like, hey, if you're trying to get out of debt, like you should go super scorched earth. Like you shouldn't enjoy your life at all. You shouldn't be taking any trips. You shouldn't be going out to restaurants. You shouldn't be spending money at all. That kind of thing. And on the short term, will you pay off more debt faster? Will you save more money faster? Yes, you will. But at what cost? Because at the end of the day, if you're like conditioning your brain and your lifestyle to be so like all or nothing kind of thing, and you're fostering this scarcity mindset, when you do reach that finish line and that pinnacle, you're going to ask yourself the question, well, what now? Or how do I even enjoy this? Because you're going to be afraid to enjoy it because you don't want to lose it. And then you're at that place to where you put in all that work, all that time, all that energy, and you look back at it and you're like, why did I even do this? And how do I enjoy it? So it's a really important thing. And I think that the word balance comes to mind. I don't really like the word balance. I think I think a better word is just being intentional, like being intentional towards your goals, but also intentional towards what's important to you at the same time and having those two work in harmony, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. To me, that is just the epitome of lifestyle design. And that's
Hmm.
what I think people need to embody and figure out because we all have our own personal interests and likes. And just because our neighbors are doing one thing and that looks like the amazing, perfect path doesn't mean that's the right path for us, right?
Yeah.
So to be able to really get intentional about what works for you and your house and your family and move from that place, I think is so powerful. I think that often gets neglected. And unfortunately, when you see it come out at the end where that beginning piece was neglected, I kind of feel bad for those people because they're lost. It's almost like the graduate student that's like coming out of high school to like pick their career for the life. They're like,
Hmm.
I don't know what to pick. I don't know what to do. You don't want to get to that point when you hit retirement, living that lost world again. Like you should be setting yourself up for success along the way to have that fun, happy retirement.
Hmm. Yeah. Yep. Could not agree more with that.
Yeah.
100%.
So you sound like you have a pretty cool, fun job. What are some things that you do to work with people to get them on that path?
Yeah, it's a number of things. Obviously, a lot of it is financial. So, like, we'll kind of do a deeper dive and be like, okay, so what has been happening with your money? And I'll do like an audit on them. And then usually when they come to that next meeting with all the information, they're like a dog with like a tail between their legs. They're like, hey, here's my stuff, you know. But then we kind of talk through things and we just refine it again to reflect their goals, of course, but then also their values as well. And usually we can get people from either being in a deficit on a monthly basis or from a very small surplus to actually a very large surplus. I worked with someone last week. I did this exact same thing with them. And they came to the meeting doing like a 3-month average of things. And they basically said, like, hey, I have like just under a $600 a month deficit. They were relying on credit cards. They're going further and further into debt. And then after refining everything, and we gave them like a decent amount of fund money so that they could enjoy their life throughout the whole process, we were able to get them out of that deficit and into a surplus of over 2 grand a month that they could use to put towards their goals and build that lifestyle that they really want and deserve. That's part of it. Then we take that stuff and we put it into what I would call like a money map, which is, in other words, a budget. But no one likes the word budget, you know? So I call it something different and I call it a money map. It's just a better connotation, I feel. Teach them how to use that, and then we develop a plan for them to accomplish their goals in the amount of time that they want. That's like the financial side of things, and then there's the emotional side and the mental side as well. So we'll take a deeper dive and have deeper conversations that go into like their hearts, they go into their minds, and it really pulls the best out of them. So something that conversations that we can use as like tools in our tool belt. So crafting these things that, like, let's just say when you need something the most, if there's something that comes up in life that's unexpected, that might take the wind out of your sails, that you have something that's actually worth fighting for, that you're going to keep going and you're not going to just like sulk in the suck and then just give up and go back to avoiding the situation as a whole. Another one would be really focusing on who you actually want to be as a person, not necessarily what you want to have or where you want to be, but who you want to be and who you really want to grow into as a person. So that when you get to that finish line, you're not left with saying, okay, I accomplished this, but now what? Instead, you're looking back and you're saying, wow, not only did I accomplish this, but I also have grown into this quality of person. And because of that, I can step into this new thing and really allow myself to blossom to new heights, kind of thing, right? Your relationship with money, marriages and their communication with money, all those different types of things. It's like a very holistic approach to finances and not just a spreadsheet and graphs.
Hmm. I like that because there really is in the big financial picture a whole bunch of pieces to the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes for us, we get so in our everyday routines of how we're handling money, how we're dealing with money, that we don't even realize that we might be missing three pieces of the puzzle to get us to where we want to go. We don't even have them as part of our plan. And you had said something, and I'm just curious for the people that come to you with a deficit that you're able to like look through and see where that money is kind of bleeding out. Is
Mm-hmm.
there a common theme where money is just kind of evaporating that people aren't even aware of?
That is the common theme. Yes.
Oh,
So
okay.
so I'll tell people all the time, and this is I do a few like online events as well. And I titled one of these events based off of a common theme that I saw, which is people have way more money than they actually think. Like I can't tell you how many people have told me I don't have any money. There's nothing left at the end of the month. I'm living paycheck to paycheck. And then we do a deep dive and we actually look at the numbers and we're like, well, no, actually, like you do have this, you do have these resources. It's just that you're not paying attention, or it's not being utilized in a way that's actually healthy for you, you know? And the reason that that happens is for a number of common themes. If someone has a spending habit, there's a number of things that could be going on, but one big one that I have seen a lot, especially recently, is this sense of control that people are trying to go after. And what I mean by that is, let's say that someone grew up in a house that was okay, but not very well off, or maybe they grew up kind of struggling in a way. And a lot of things were outside of their control. Like they weren't able to have the things that their friends had. Maybe they grew up on government assistance. Maybe they grew up with a abusive father or abusive mother or whatever it might be. There's just a lot of things that were out of their control growing up. So now that they're an adult and they can have, their own choices, they're making big girl money, big boy money, and they have that autonomy. Now they're like, well, this is my life. I get to choose what I want to do. And even if it's not something that's serving me, that's okay because at least I have the ability to feel in control, right? But that very thing that they're going after, which is that sense of control, is actually the very thing that's putting their finances out of control. And it's an
Oh,
interesting paradox there, So sometimes it's just getting to that realization for people and having them realize that. And then they're like, wow. So the situation that I grew up with, that I was trying so hard to get away from, that I was not put in willingly, it was just the cards that I was dealt. I'm actually self-fabricating it willingly now. And it's the very thing that I was trying to get away from in the first place. And that sort of like aha moment really does help people understand that, like, hey, this is not actually solving the issue that I'm trying to solve. And I need to do things a little bit differently, So that's just one common trend among several different trends that I see all the time.
yeah. And like I said, you wouldn't even realize that was an issue for you unless you have almost that other person's perspective, right? Being like, hey, I
Hmm.
don't know if you know this, but you're doing this, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, those
Yeah.
can be life changing. Those aha moments can pivot you onto a completely different path moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Right before I hopped onto this call, I literally like hung up probably 20 minutes before we recorded this podcast with a client. I had my very first meeting with her, brand new client, and we were talking about her spending habits. And she said that before she was actually very cheap to where she wouldn't spend money on really anything. But there was a change that happened 2 years ago to where now she's wanting to like spend all this money and shower her kids with all these gifts and like all this kinds of stuff. And because of that, the credit cards have been racking up and she's gotten herself into quite a hole. And I said, okay, well, what happened 2 years ago? And she goes, well, that's actually when my sister passed away. And
Mhm.
her sister was her best friend. And she's like, I never even thought about that. And I'm like, okay, so let's talk about your sister. And we just started talking more. And the more that we dug, the more she actually started to realize that she's actually just trying to fill that void from
Mhm.
losing her sister. And she's trying to bring more to the table for her kids so that she doesn't feel like they're missing out on her or that she's missing out on them, but it's actually causing more destruction to the family, you know? So it's even just those things where it's just talking to someone and having them ask you questions that maybe you wouldn't have thought about really does bring things to the forefront of your mind to
Mhm.
then you can then heal from and then actually just move forward with. So that's even just another example.
Wow, that's powerful, powerful
Mhm.
stuff. Like I said a second ago, you can shift for the better, but you can also shift in the opposite direction too,
Yeah.
right? So for
Yeah.
her to realize that and get back on path was
It's
definitely
huge.
helpful. Yeah.
Hmm.
And you have a pretty cool tool that you use with your clients, the abundance activator. And I would
Hmm.
love it for you to kind of walk through that process that you use with your clients.
Yeah, so this is actually something that I use it in my teaching when I work with my clients, but I also just have it as like a free resource for anyone who's just curious about trying something out that's a little bit more in my world. So maybe I'll even just give you the link to that so you can put it in
Mhm.
the show notes for anyone listening who's
Yeah,
interested.
definitely.
But yeah, it's called the 30-day abundance activator. And basically the purpose of it is to help you kind of break free from the scarcity mindset, right? That's something that a lot of people struggle with, especially if they're trying to save money or they're trying to retire early. We kind of find ourselves slipping down that scarcity mindset route, which we've already talked about, we don't want to do, right? So this is just a way for you to help unlock that abundant mindset, which then is, of course, like if you have an abundant mindset, it's going to bring you an abundant life, right?
Mhm.
So in this resource, there's a few things that you can do. I have like a list of like 10 abundance affirmations that you would kind of have. And basically, the way it works is like there's 30 days to do this, there's 10 affirmations. So basically, you'd pick one affirmation every day and you'd work through that list basically once every 10 days. So you're going to go through the list 3 times over the course of this month. And you would just start with one affirmation and have some music that kind of accompanies it, which I provide the music for you as well. And you just take about 10 minutes to just expand on this affirmation. So you play the music, it's some nice peaceful like meditation music kind of thing. And then you just start repeating that affirmation over and over and over. And then once you feel like you get yourself into a place to where like you're starting to connect with that affirmation, you can then expand on that affirmation and start sprinkling in things that are meaningful to you in your own life. So maybe it has to do something with a limiting belief that you have about money that you want to change. Maybe it has something to do with your kids or your spouse or this overall vision that you have with your life. You just start working that into that affirmation. And then at the end of that 10 minutes, you just take an additional 5 minutes and you break out your abundance journal, which I would also provide for you as well. And you just write down for 5 minutes what you experienced, what sort of thoughts came up, anything new that may have came up, anything that may have shifted for you, and you just write that down as like a nice little journaling exercise as well. And the reason I have all three of these pieces is because it ties in auditory, which is the music that you're listening to. It ties in you speaking something out loud, which I also think is very important. And then it also ties in the physical aspect of it, which is writing something down physically. So it ties in a lot of different senses, the different aspects of your life, and it puts it all together into one to really bring everything to a head for you. And if you were to do that every day for 15 minutes for 30 days straight, I would imagine that it'd be very hard to not have either a fully abundant mindset or at least a much more abundant mindset than what you started with, you know? So that's kind of like the whole idea, the premise, the purpose of that tool of the 30-day abundance activator.
I love that. Anytime I've done any kind of exercise that allows me to energetically just connect with what I want and connect with the bigger picture, I've seen such almost like, I don't want to say miraculous, but like huge shifts that you're like,
Hmm.
how could this simple process bring me to this completely different place to where I'm at now? So
Yeah.
that's why when I saw you had that, I'm like, ooh, this is a really cool resource that Cody has.
Hmm.
So I will tag that in the show notes, and I'd love for you to share where else listeners can reach out and connect with you and all that fun stuff.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a couple places. If you want to just connect with me, you can just look me up on the socials. It's just Sizemore Financial Coaching. You can also join in. I have like a free like Facebook community as well, and it's called Master Your Money for Millennials. So you can just type that in and join in there. If you're not a millennial, it's cool. I'll invite you in. I'm just a millennial, so I have a soft spot for them. You know what I mean? So that's a good place to connect with me too. And if you're also just curious about learning more about like what it looks like to be more connected with these things and to rapidly eliminate your debt or to amplify your savings, I do offer a free webinar as well. And that webinar is just called Master Your Money: 5 Key Shifts to Rapidly Eliminate Your Debt and Amplify Your Wealth. And that you can find that at masteryourmoney.support. So not .com, but masteryourmoney.support, because that's what I really want to do for you guys, is give you that support. So you can just find that there and watch that as well.
Perfect. I will put it in the show notes so people don't even have to mess up typing that out. So
Look at that.
it'll be in
Look
the
at
show
that.
notes for them. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the show today, Cody.
Yeah, not a problem. It was a fun conversation. It's something I think is really important, especially for people who have these big goals, like trying to retire early. Awesome, awesome goal, awesome goal. But like we said, it's about the quality of the journey and not just the destination. So really important conversation. And I appreciate you having me on today.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Thanks again.
Mhm.